Hi, this is Stephen Carson coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri, in these United States. Thanks for joining once again. Continuing with this series on the specialist relationship between the U.S. and Israel, more special than any other relationship. And we'll find out a little bit more about that today. The only thing to mention is that I get support from some faithful subscribers at Subscribestar. The link is in the video description on YouTube. Most people donate $5 a month, but it adds up, helps me pay for expenses of the show. Okay, let's get to it. This is an amazing story. I wish I had more some visuals. You're gonna have to use your imagination. Tried to hint at them in the thumbnail, but I wish I had some visuals of this stuff because this is crazy. The part at the beginning about brand Israel and everything. Anyway, okay, so let's see. I should show you the book. Okay, so Hunger the Dye Merchant, friend of ours, recommended this book by Ilan Pappé. Hopefully I'm saying that right. A scholar who was working in Israel until a Jewish scholar who was working in Israel until they kicked him out. So it's called Lobbying for Zionism on Both Sides of the Atlantic. And he covers and goes deeper on some of the lobbying stuff. I'm not gonna, I may or may not cover any of that, but what jumped out to me was this chapter, which we're gonna go to now. How do I go back to it easily? Here we go. The War Against American Civil Society, which starts out with this branding exercise. In our era, everything is a company and treated as a company with a corporate brand. Churches, as you may have noticed, with their single word names like I don't know, the light or something. I made that. I've tried to make one up instead of naming one I actually know about. So churches with single names and sort of corporate logos and all this, and even countries can be thought of, and as we'll see, have been thought of as a brand that needs a marketing exercise, particularly if your reputation internationally is not going so well, right? So yeah, so let's start here. So what was the problem that Brand Israel was trying to address? From 2001, Israeli policymakers noted a systemic change in attitude towards Israel on both sides of the Atlantic. This chapter is pretty U.S. It is U.S. focused, but the book talks about the U.S. and the U.K. Kind of bounces back and forth between them, just so you know, in case that's of interest to you. The traditional tools of advocacy and lobbying that were very effective in dealing with political elites and mainstream media or academia seemed less effective here. So, yeah, so the project of changing people's hearts and minds about Israel was assessed as an issue pertaining directly to Israel's national security, too important to be left in the hands of the pro-Israel lobby in the US. This would be directed from Israel. Okay, so you've got the elites, standard elite theory, right? You've got the elites, and you've got the governing elites, the non-governing elites, and then you just have the people who are not in any sense elites, in any sense in power and running the country. But as we know also from elite theory, you have this issue of moral unity where the elite and the people can get too far apart. And then you have a very volatile situation where a rival elite or rival castles can rise up and challenge the regime. So being far apart, having the people say very upset with Israel, let's imagine, because of something terrible they're doing, let's imagine, while the elites are just standing 110% behind them, that tension between the people and the regime can get too far apart. Some people think elite theory says that basically the elites can do whatever they want. That's not quite right. There is a lot of latitude for the elites, for the ruling elites, but not infinite latitude. And regimes have definitely, as you might know, found themselves tossed out on their ear, often executed, when they get too far away from a moral unity with the people. Sort of the deal gets too bad for the people, and then they're ready to take action. It's pitchforks and torches time, right? So Israel was sensing that they were, as we've went through at length in covering the Israel lobby by Mearsheimer and Walt, they had sewn up the elites, the governing elites, pretty well, but they were sensing that they were losing the people and that this could be a problem for their national security. So they treated this as, a national security issue, an issue for the government to address, the government of Israel to address. So what was their strategy? First strategy was to rebrand Israel as the only progressive democracy in the 21st century Middle East. We stand with Israel because they're the only democracy in the Middle East. I've heard many people say, politicians say this. The second was to respond to more assertive criticism of Israel and civil society with the traditional methods of intimidation, smearing, and character assassination. You can imagine someone, for example, you criticize something the state of Israel is doing, and someone says, you're saying that because you are anti-Semitic. So this is a way to assassinate your character, smear you, and try to take you out of the conversation, right? Any strong words of criticism would be decried as delegitimization of the Jewish state. Hey, doesn't Israel have a right to exist? Why are you criticizing what Israel's doing? It has to do that to exist. You don't want it to exist? You don't want any Jews to exist, do you? The listeners understand. They don't need me to replay this. You know the stratagem. Interesting point here is that the second prong of the strategy made it harder for keen-eyed observers to believe in the narrative of the first one. So smearing and character assassination to shut down dialogue makes it harder to position yourself as a champion of democracy and dialogue, if you follow. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so what did they do? They embraced the rebranding exercise in spectacular fashion. A poster of an almost naked Miss Israel, the famous Gal Gadot, and a poster of 4 fit young men, equally underdressed, were the face of Israel in 2007 in a campaign named Brand Israel. Now, as I said, this wasn't just some private PR agency. This was commissioned by the Prime Minister's office, the Foreign and Tourist Ministries, and the Jewish Agency. This was an official government-backed, government-directed marketing campaign. So what was the point of using Gal Gadot and these fit, young, underdressed men? The former Miss Israel was meant to convince young heterosexual American men of the rebranding of the Jewish state as a haven for young people. Hey, we're young, we're hip, we're sexy. While the attractive men represented the Israeli LGBT community, advertising Tel Aviv as the gay capital of Israel. I haven't dug into it, but I understand that, in fact, there is a lot of LGBT nightlife or whatever in Israel. So to be fair, they're not false advertising on that front. Okay, so let's see, what else do I want to highlight here? Yeah, so the campaign was to rebrand the country's image to appear relevant and modern instead of militaristic and religious. Huge sums of money, and we'll be hearing some numbers later in the chapter here. Huge sums of money were allocated for marketing the new image abroad in order to combat what the political and academic elite in Israel considered a global campaign to delegitimize the Jewish state. This was to be a gigantic effort, and the team appointed to see it through was accordingly dubbed BIG, the Brand Israel Group, BIG. Okay, so now remember this chief target here, not only, I think, but a chief target was the United States. So freshly created front organizations were asked to disseminate this new version of Israel as a dream come true, emphasizing beauty, fun, and technological achievements. One such outfit was the David Project in America. Okay, so we've got the Brand Israel Group in Israel working on this. And then we have fronts in America, for example, like the David Project. One of its many actions was to try and counter the constant characterization of Israel as one of the most hated states in the world, together with Iran and North Korea. The David Project found that Israel was not among the first 25 states where people liked to belong. The project's purpose was to convince everyone that Israel was one of the happiest places on earth due to its technological achievements and supposedly high standards of living. Okay, misspeaking here. Let me take a drink. We have Hasbra live in the chat. So if you're on YouTube, you can watch the live chat and you can see the techniques of, Brand Israel and so forth being deployed in real time, which is great. It's an example of exactly what we're going to be talking about here. So thank you. Okay, so they wanted to leverage their history. And yeah, so this is interesting. Here's the David Project's explanation for the discrepancy between what the state had to offer and its negative global image. So this is their, marketing analysis. We know misperceptions of Israel are rampant in the media. Ordinary citizens across the globe see Israel cast as yet another violent nation in a region steeped in unrest and war. Conversations taking place in print, on television, and in the blogosphere often regard the Arab-Israeli conflict as both all-consuming and myopic. The diversity and excitement of Israeli society is often subsumed by 20-second sound bites focusing on only one aspect of the Israeli story. So, the constant conflict that Israel is in, the, sort of unrest within Palestine, right? And also conflicts with Lebanon and so forth, have everybody just thinking of Israel as just, this war-torn state. Hey, no, it's a happy, young, happening place, right? So Brand Israel team says, what are our challenges? How do we change perceptions? How do we introduce nuance into global conversations surrounding Israel? How do we discuss the highlights and achievements of Israeli society while also recognizing its weaknesses and shortcomings? What needs to happen to remove Israel from the bright spotlight of a violent conflict? So, on the official website of the Israeli Foreign Ministry, they gave some of their recommendations. Abandon aiming to win arguments with facts, information, or moral points of view. Okay, so don't try to win the argument. And so they dispensed with that for the sake of a new idea, the need to brand Israel and market it like a product. So Brand Israel is like a corporate marketing campaign. That's the way we'll come at this. We're not going to try to argue with people anymore and give them facts and, facts and logic. And as we've discussed often in our spheres, feelings, in fact, don't care about your facts. So this isn't entirely crazy what they're thinking here, right? They're onto something. So Gideon Meyer of Israel's foreign ministry told Haaretz that he would rather have a style section item on Israel than a front page story, right? We want to be fashionable. Picture the country as fashionable. So what this meant in practice was that any PR campaign for Israel had to try and avoid any association with the conflict or the Palestinian issue. That's just bad vibes, man. And we want to have good vibes associated with our country. So don't look at the conflict behind the curtain. Um, so we can assume that the idea was to move the conversation away from the elephant in the room, the Israeli occupation. And I love this analogy, personal favorite show of mine. I'm not alone. Like Fawlty Tower's most famous episode, where the hotel owner is trying not to mention the Second World War whenever he has German guests. Don't mention the war. The message to activists was that mentioning the war, that is the Palestinians, was not a good idea. So hush up about that. Talk about happy things, right? Proving that Israel is right and the Palestinians are wrong may be emotionally satisfying for advocates, but not necessarily effective in changing people's way of thinking about Israel. Okay, so what kind of money are we talking about? Well, this is just the beginning, but let's start getting some amounts out here in US dollars generally. Foreign Minister C.P. Livni appointed Ido Aharoni to head Israel's first brand management office and awarded him a $4 million budget, in addition to the already established $3 million annual expenditure on Hasbara. Hasbara, you might have heard me use the term earlier, is propaganda, basically, Israeli Zionist propaganda. And $11 million for the Israeli tourism ministry in North America. Smaller budgets were distributed for work in Europe. So it's primarily targeting the US. The impact of American public opinion is indicated by Israeli politicians' focus on the US. They sensed that delegitimization had been particularly successful there. Okay, so you can see why I'm bringing this into this series on the US-Israel relationship. We've talked a lot about the targeting of the politicians with Mearsheimer and Walt's Israel lobby. Now we're going to talk more about the targeting of the American people with various sorts of propaganda and other counter-activism stuff, which we'll see. And of course, if you paid any attention to the news over the last couple of years, you've seen this playing out again, even though this book comes up to right before October 7th, 2023, I think, because I don't believe there's a mention in here of that. But the playbook was pulled out again in the last 2 years. Okay, they recruited top people from the world of marketing and advertising. These included the Saatchi brothers, reported to be doing the job for free, PR experts such as David Saranga, who told PR Week that the two groups Israel was targeting were liberals and people aged 16 to 30, hence Miss Israel and the men in swimwear on the posters. Okay, let's see. The experts told the diplomats that Israel had failed to be liked in the past because Americans know a lot about Israel, just not the right things. They think of Israel as a grim, war-torn country, not one booming with high-tech and busy outdoor cafes. So in 2005, the mission was to sell Israel as a quasi-American society. Hey, we're just like you, right? We're a democracy, and we're diverse, and all this stuff, right? David Sable from Young and Rubicam, leading market experts in the US, explained that they were about to assist in refashioning Israel as the reincarnation of a new USA, because Americans don't see Israel as being like the US. Israel as a brand was already strong in America, he conceded, but the trouble was that it is better known than liked and constrained by lack of relevance. Sable elaborated, Americans find Israel to be totally irrelevant to their lives and they are tuning out, particularly 18 to 34-year-old males, the most significant target. So in marketing, there's all this talk about demographics, right? Demographic groups. Liberals, as mentioned, and 18 to 34-year-old males is another big target, right? So, Brand Israel started by offering free trips for architectural writers and then for food and wine writers. Okay, so they're to convey an image of Israel as a productive, vibrant, cutting-edge culture. By 2010, the Charm Offensive was preparing blueprints for the future. Gary Rosenblatt in the Jewish Week described this. Think of Israel as a product undergoing an overhaul to make it more competitive in the marketplace. what's called for are fewer stories explaining the rationale for the security fence, and more attention to scientists doing stem cell research on the cutting edge, or the young computer experts who gave the world instant messaging. By the way, there's a account I've been enjoying on Twitter, Carl Radel, Karlradl. Actually, here, so if I'm going to mention him, I should be able to come up with his actual handle because I can't remember. I'm used to his screen name. I don't remember what his handle is. Give me a sec. Oh, great. He's been posting all day. Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah, it is. That's it. At Carl Radl, Karlradl. He has a series on his Substack, which he mentions on Twitter, where he looks at various inventions that have been falsely claimed been done by Jewish inventors, when actually that's not true. It's a very lengthy series which he adds to on a regular basis, and I think he even talks about instant messaging, that claim that Israelis invented instant messaging. If I recall, you'd have to check. Okay. Okay, so a few years into the program, the Israeli Consul General in New York proudly reported a paradigm shift in America. Before Brand Israel, the American public, for some unfathomable reason, had been unaware that Israel was a democratic, moral, and successful state. Now they knew. Let's see. Yeah, some very interesting other things were done that didn't work out so well. They brought Ethiopian Jews from Israel, brought by Israel at heart, to speak in African American churches. Imagine bringing African Americans from Harlem to tell people in Brighton about the American dream, and you may understand the absurdity of such a move. They were replaced later by more professional selections of high school students for the mission. So they tried some things that they realized were not working out so well. By 2010, the Israeli Economic Weekly Globes reported that the foreign ministry had allocated 100 million shekels, that's about 26 million US dollars in 2010, mind you, to branding for the coming years. This money was mainly destined to help fight the growing delegitimization on online social networks. The foreign ministry was very optimistic about the chances of an online campaign. Its research unit found out that social media users show sympathy and identity with content that interests them, regardless of the identity or the political affiliation of the publisher. So let's just put out some good memes, do some vibe meming, and people aren't going to pay that much attention that Israel's behind this, or that it's just avowed Israel propaganda. Let's see. Right, so an early success had already been reported that year. Scott Pirro, a gay Jewish public relations social media professional, announced in a press release that Israel's Ministry of Tourism, the Tel Aviv Tourism Board, and Israel's largest LGBT organization, the Agudah, were joining together to launch Tel Aviv Gay Vibe. I'm sorry, I should have said that as a brand. Tel Aviv Gay Vibe, an online tourism campaign to promote Tel Aviv as a travel destination for LGBT Europeans. Critical observers called this initiative pinkwashing, comparing the invocation of women's rights in the 19th century to justify colonization with the cynical deployment of gay rights as a tool to legitimize the continued oppression of Palestinians. So then, they did have some concerns. They were talking themselves up as having had some success, but they had some concerns because the UN, the United Nations, was ready to publish a groundbreaking report about the Israeli occupation, and no amount of charm could salvage Brand Israel from its conclusions. So Israel changed tack and went on the offensive. So in the branding exercise, they had been just trying to defensive, right? Let's protect and enhance the reputation of Israel. They did mention some smearing, but more the emphasis was on a positive brand for Israel, right? Well, now they're going to go on the attack. The report was analyzed by the Reut, R-E-U-T, Reut Institute as a document that questions the right of Israel to exist, connecting it to the international outcry directed at Israel after its second attack on Lebanon in 2006. The international furor, according to this institute, was the product of a radical Islamist ideology originating in Iran, from which a web of delegitimization was spun with the help of Hezbollah and Hamas. Okay, so if any bad stuff is out there about us, it's because of Islamist stuff. And notice, isn't this nice? If you look at the fellow in the chat, he has actually been trying this tack. So I told you this would be fun for him to do this live while we learn about the techniques and then see them demonstrated in the YouTube chat. He said, is he a Nation of Islam guy, right? Does he like Farrakhan? I think I saw that earlier. So this is just straight out of the playbook, right? You might want to try, sir, to move to the next tactic you've got in your handbook or whatever. Okay. Hopefully we'll get to that too. So if this campaign continued, the Reut Institute warned that Israel would become a pariah state, and there would be no solution for the Palestinian question, hence necessitating a one-state solution. And they don't want that. Okay. So need to rebrand Israel. Oh, okay. They're gonna assist all this with a founding of new NGOs. But more importantly than anything else, the report declared that it was necessary to rebrand Israel. Currently, Israel is branded as a violent and serial violator of international law. So at least according to the Reut Institute, all the money and experts in the world had not yet helped to rebrand Israel as a peaceful and attractive nation. The obvious solution of being less violent towards the Palestinians seemed to have passed them by entirely. Yeah, so he puts it in a sort of funny way there, but notice that none of this is like, well, maybe we should just stop doing the things that are giving us such a bad reputation. Instead, no, we're going to keep doing those things. We're going to keep doing horrible things to the Palestinians, and we're just going to try to put a good PR spin on it. I can see that one of my friends is unhappy with Bob in the chat, but as I've said, if I have any moderators here, please leave Bob alone. He is playing a wonderful role by live demonstrating Hasbara techniques as we discuss Hasbara. The meta-ness of this is really pleasing to me, so don't kick him out. Okay, so at least according to the Reut Institute, all the money and experts in the world had not yet helped to rebrand Israel as a peaceful and attractive nation. The obvious solution, I said that, yeah. So they're not going to actually be less violent. They just want to tell everybody that they're less violent while continuing to be violent. So since Israel could not be defeated militarily and economically, its enemies were trying to destroy it through ideas. The Reut Institute saw the assimilation of young Jewish people into Gentile communities as part and parcel of delegitimization. Young Jews were distancing themselves from Israel. This was reaffirmed by a famous article by Peter Beinart in the New York Review of Books in 2010. But Beinart suggested that the growing gulf between young Jews and the American Jewish establishment emerged from the desire not to be identified with the occupation and the criminal policies of the state. So even young Jewish people, you know, a lot of this, you can imagine, this Brand Israel campaign is meant for non-Jewish people, right? Non-Jewish Americans, for example. But they're saying, here Beinart is saying, well, even young Jews don't really want to be associated with this. The brand of Israel is so toxic. Even young Jews are like, yeah, I'm not a big Zionist or anything, right? Okay. So now we turn to, now we start seeing, so this has been like the general public, right, that they've been targeting with Gal Gadot and so forth. But now we're going to, eventually in this chapter, we're going to get to the universities. And as you might have watched after October 7th, the universities became a big battleground with big Jewish billionaire funders pulling money from universities because they didn't crush the campus protesters fast enough, and so on and so forth, right? But it's kind of fun to go back in time and see this campus targeting happening back then. Okay, so more forces were needed to recover from the conceptual inferiority the Reut Institute had identified. They wanted to invent a scholarly scaffolding to justify Israel's behavior. The ivory tower had to be put to work. So they wanted scholarly knowledge to be enlisted not only against the enemies from within, but also against those in the USA and Britain. The new campaign was led by the National Religious University of Bar Ilan and was soon joined by the University of Tel Aviv. The main role of Israeli academia was to explain why Israel was still being delegitimized in 2010. Answers varied according to the academic's field of expertise. One key group was those specializing in the history of anti-Semitism and Jewish studies. This concentrated scholarly effort was meant to provide an intellectual framework connecting contemporary anti-Israel opinion with historical European anti-Semitism. They first articulated this in response to the September 2001 World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa. It was a meeting convened to discuss racism throughout the world, including Palestine. And it was depicted by the Israeli government as the formal launch of the sinister delegitimization campaign against Israel, as Arab delegates sought to pass a declaration describing Israel as a racist apartheid state. The fact that proceedings concluded 3 days before 9/11 did not escape the Brand Israel team, and so the two events were linked as two aspects of the same assault against the free world. This connection between 9/11 and the delegitimization campaign was made very openly by Benjamin Netanyahu on various occasions. For example, during a speech in the Knesset on June 23, 2011, he talked about an unholy alliance between radical Islam and the radical left in the West, joining forces against the free democratic world, which Israel symbolized more than any other place on the globe. From that moment onwards, any international rulings against Israel, any actions by civil and human rights organizations were all stages in the well-structured plan devised in Durban. Okay, there's a big international conspiracy against Israel. And you've got radical Islam involved, radical left involved. They're just trying to delegitimize Israel. So don't listen to them. Okay, yeah, so, right. So, Meir Ahmed Intelligence and Terrorism Information Center in Tel Aviv identified the same web of enemies as everyone before and after it. Radical Islam working together with leftist anti-Zionists and right-wing anti-Semites. Okay, so you might see, if you're critical of Israel, you might see them trying to put you in one of these boxes, or maybe try to tick more than one of those boxes, right? Oh, you like Farrakhan and you're a right-wing anti-Semite, check, right? So Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Danny Ayalon affirmed this interpretation in a speech to the Jewish Agency in October 2010. Our enemies recruit agents who work under the pretense of human rights activism to delegitimize Israel. Terrorists and their emissaries are distorting the international law in order to rob democracies, such as Israel, the right to defend itself. And he added, this is a threat to peace for the whole world. In the Knesset, he called for a counterweb made of Jewish and non-Jewish NGOs and academic institutions that would join forces in the front against the delegitimization and describe the reality in the world as it really is. By 2011, the government had already invested millions in creating centers for Israeli studies in various universities around the world, sending high school graduates, selecting the most handsome and articulate among them, to market a youthful Western Israel. Special teams of tweeters, Facebookers, and bloggers began to work 24/7, responding to anything that sounded remotely anti-Israel, while lobbies modeled on AIPAC in the USA were founded in Europe as well. Now, I have been a little too small for attention until more recently, where I have more and more often seen people like this jumping in under my tweets, counter signaling, and so forth. And now, of course, we have a dedicated um, Hasbara agent in the chat right now, which is I couldn't have I didn't pay for this. This came free for me. This is great. Okay. Right. So the whole campaign was conducted with military precision. General Dengat, the coordinator of Israeli policy in the occupied territories, spelled this out when he said, in specific reference to Hamas, the war on legitimization and public opinion is not easier than that fought in the battlefield. There is a culture of lies, distortions, and fabrication. Oh, I thought this was a fun mention. One of the ones that helped them think through how do we, have countermeasures to critiques of Israel and so forth was Alan Dershowitz. Hey, look at that. I know, shocker, but I just thought that was interesting. Here's an interesting thing that they threw in. The author of this policy paper proposed an interdisciplinary tool that integrated strategic management, marketing and branding approaches with diplomatic and ideological doctrines, and added to the mix an old Jewish notion called tikkun olam. Tikkun olam posited the ethical and moral responsibility of the Jewish people to the world. It's sort of like when politicians say, think of the children. We're doing it for the children. Well, here, you got to support Israel because Jewish people have this great high calling to help the world and heal the world. Tikkun olam, I think it literally means heal the world. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to skip forward a bit. So the Israeli Ministry for Strategic Affairs was born and entrusted with the mission of forcing world public opinion to become unambiguously pro-Israel again. In 2006, Avigdor Lieberman, a notorious name, head of the hard-right party Yisrael Beitenu, was courted by Ehud Olmert, and so they created a new ministry for Lieberman, this Ministry for Strategic Affairs. But then it was disbanded in 2008, but then in 2009 they resurrected it. Anyway, it kind of goes back and forth. In 2015, the ministry was instructed by the government to focus on what was seen as the spearhead of the global campaign to delegitimize Israel. That is the BDS movement. So this is boycott, divest, sanction, I believe. You know what? I don't want to say something wrong. BDS, boycott. Yeah, boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, BDS. Okay, so BDS was starting to have some success in countering Israel, having people protest Israel's brutal actions. So they put BDS as a target of their propaganda or whatever. Okay, so AIPAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee, AIPAC was entrusted with targeting media outlets that Israel typically neglected, for instance, Al Jazeera. More specifically, the lobby was called to the battlefield after the network aired an investigative documentary called The Lobby. And I'm sorry, I actually haven't seen this. I don't think I knew about this. And it sounds quite interesting. They, at least when this book was published a couple years ago, they're saying it's all available on YouTube. They broadcast the first installment in Britain, but then the second series could not be aired at all because he goes into detail, which I'm going to skip, but basically the U.S. lobby was able to prevent the airing of the second part of it. So AIPAC successfully censored it, and it can now only be watched on YouTube. In its actions, AIPAC revealed how much it could control the right to freedom of speech in the U.S. What was AIPAC so keen to cover up? Al Jazeera's reporter, James Anthony Kleinfeld, succeeded in posing as an enthusiastic supporter of Israel and was embraced by several pro-Israel advocacy organizations during the Obama and Trump eras. He was invited by outfits such as, pay attention to some of these names, they'll come up again, Stand With Us, which the author here refers to as SW for short, Stand With Us, the Brandeis Center, the Israel Project, the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, FDD, Israel on Campus Coalition, the Zionist Organization of America, ZOA, Fuel for Truth, and the Canary Mission. So he talks a little bit about Stand With Us, founded by Roz Rothstein, a female family therapist from Los Angeles in 2001. They're active on American campuses. They imitate the work of an NGO in Israel with similar purpose. Let's see. Anyway, I wanted to jump to this. Stand With Us is highly litigious. It has a legal section employing 80 lawyers, that's 80 lawyers, who weaponize legal procedures against BDS resolutions and pro-Palestinian activists on campus. It seeks to shut down any attempts to express solidarity with Palestine. And he goes into the story about an Olympia food co-op that decided to not support Israel or something, and Stand With Us went after them. Let's see. Yeah, Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. This is quite interesting. The purpose of this center, established in 2012, was to portray Israel as a victim of human rights abuses. The trick was to frame any action against Israel as one against the Jewish people as a whole, and hence anti-Semitic. That strange phrasing, human rights under law, is because a center called the Center for Human Rights Law would be a disaster, as Israel violates these laws daily. But the untrained eye would not see the difference between human rights under law, that is, domestic Israeli law, and international human rights law. So very tricky stuff, right? Human rights under law is different than human rights law. Quite different, it turns out. Okay, let's see, what else? We're going to move a little faster through the rest of this. Let's see, which one are they talking about here? The AMCHA initiative, Amka, Your People in Hebrew. They target the pro-Palestinian and pro-Palestine and Palestinian groups on the U.S. West Coast by equating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism or even mild criticism of Israel. On the Hill, the Brandeis Center joined other organizations in trying to promote legislation that aimed to equate anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel as the best means of arresting changes in American civil society's attitudes toward Israel. It supported the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, a controversial piece of legislation introduced to the U.S. Congress in 2016, which required the Department of Education to use its definition of anti-Semitism when reviewing, investigating, or deciding whether there's been a violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And I'm sorry, I didn't do the research. I don't know if it's the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act exactly in this form, but something like this has been passed. They do use the Holocaust Museum's definition of anti-Semitism or something in legal action against Americans at this point, I believe. And that definition, as you can imagine, is pretty expansive and not what most of us would think anti-Semitism means. Let's see, Foundation for Defense of Democracies. That was a very familiar term to me. It was established as a knee-jerk neocon reaction to 9/11. So that's a creature of the neocons. Let's see. Okay, so now the internet. The internet is now a critical battlefield. Leading the way is the website Canary Mission, established in 2014, and several others like Campus Monitor are spearheading the lobby's campaigns in that domain. Canary Mission works like a secret service organization, compiling files on student activists in universities, threatening to send their names to prospective employers. The Israeli government uses these lists to prevent pro-BDS American citizens from entering Israel. Let's see. And then all these activities were comprehensively exposed in that Al Jazeera documentary, The Lobby USA. Okay, let's see. Yeah, then the lobby pressured the funder of Al Jazeera, which is the government of Qatar, okay, and got them to, not publish that second series. I believe that was their success. Yeah. Yeah, they were able to obtain a promise that the installment on the US would not be screened by the network in 2018. As typical of the lobby, on the one hand, it prided itself on its ability to exert pressure on the Qatari government, while on the other hand, it demonstrated its total lack of gratitude by trying to undermine Al Jazeera's presence in the USA. In March 2018, a bipartisan group of US lawmakers, including Democratic Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, and Senator Ted Cruz, urged Attorney General Jeff Sessions to investigate whether Al Jazeera should register as a foreign agent. Now, this is particularly funny because, as you may know, AIPAC has prevented itself somehow from being registered as a foreign agent. Though supposedly JFK was about to do that right before he was assassinated, but it's never happened. AIPAC continues to not be registered as a foreign agent. So, to sum up, all these fronts and all these campaigns were doomed to fail as brutal Israeli actions continued on the ground. AIPAC failed to hold back the tidal wave of pro-Palestinian activism in civil society. It continues to promote legislation against BDS on a federal basis or in specific states, but this tactic, which worked for a while but not everywhere, often hardened the attitudes of pro-Palestinian activists. Looking at AIPAC's website in 2023, I think that's when the book was published, so the book comes up to there, and following its main activities since November 2022, when an extreme right-wing coalition won the Israeli national elections, one gets the impression that it still believes that what matters are politics from above and not from below. Its main project is now called AIPAC-PAC, Public Affairs Committee, which focuses on recruiting funds for pro-Israel candidates on Capitol Hill. It boasts of having 365 politicians on both sides of the aisle on its roster, and it spent more than $17 million on them. Let's see. Yeah, so this last line, and then we'll stop. This last line jumped out to me. This parallel movement of losing the sympathy of the public on the one hand, while still having clout with the political elite on the other, is not going to change anytime soon. So again, that comes back to that moral unity issue, right? They've got the political elite in the U.S. in the palm of their hands, as we've seen until just like the last week, right? It seems like we're starting to have people counter signaling what's happening in Gaza because people are starting to sense that they might get smeared with the genocide in Gaza. Okay, so I thought that was quite interesting, the Brand Israel campaign and so forth. Here, let's see. Let's go back here. I'm sorry, I'm running the show, so I couldn't keep up with all the fun back and forth in the chat. I hope you guys had fun, and it was fun to see the demonstration of the techniques live. All right, I'm just going to check a few things, and then we'll wrap it up. What am I looking for? Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, I think I am ready to close it. I guess I won't talk about whether I'm done with this series or not because friends keep recommending stuff and I go, oh, okay, that is pretty interesting. I want to include that in the series. So might keep going, but I don't want to go forever. I want to wrap it up eventually here. We've hit a couple different angles. Let me just summarize real quick. Obviously, the bulk of the series was simply walking through Mearsheimer and Walt's The Israel Lobby, which is, in my view, sort of 101 material. Like, you've got to understand the Israel Lobby before you do anything else in this space. So there's what, 5 episodes just on that. And then since then, I went back 100 years ago. I thought this was quite interesting to see how Jacob Schiff and other Jewish bankers in America decided to target Russia for various, reasons of their own, and try to get the U.S. to target Russia. I thought that was pretty interesting since we've been seeing action against Russia in the last few years as well. And then last time I did the Israeli panopticon, which talks about how Israel battle tests surveillance and other kinds of technologies and techniques in Gaza, and then sells them to other governments to be used on us. So I thought that was quite interesting. So hopefully I've hit quite a few different angles. Oh, I missed one. Sorry. The Jewish mob in Israel. This is a theme that Ryan Dawson really introduced me to. And that is that, listening to Ryan Dawson, which is that the Zionism has definitely used underworld activity all along, including at the very creation of the State of Israel, which is what I highlighted in the Jewish mob in Israel. So I've tried to make it an interesting series and kind of bop around and cover things from different angles. We'll see if I find another angle that I think is worth covering. I should be on Pete Canonia's on, well, we're recording on Monday. I don't know when I'll put it out, but I'll be recording with Pete on Monday to talk more about that Israeli panopticon stuff. He thought that was quite interesting and wanted to share that with his audience, so I'm happy to do that with him. And speaking of Ryan Dawson, there is a conversation between Ryan Dawson and Martyr Maid talking about the Epstein stuff. Ryan Dawson's spent a lot of time studying that. And so they do a deep dive on that, which is available on Martyr Maid Substack. So that's one to check out that is related for those of us who oppose, as Academic Agent has hilariously put it, for those of us who oppose Team Epstein. Okay, so I think we're there. Anything else? Okay. Okay, anyway, thank you. Black Master Roshi says the Jewish mob stream was fascinating. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thanks everybody, and especially to someone who simply goes by the name Bob, who's been in there trying to counter signal throughout the stream, which worked out just well. Normally I might kick him out, but this worked out great because you could literally see him deploying the techniques that I was describing in the chat live. So that was pretty cool. Thank you, Bob, for that. And I will see you guys next time.